So it falls to me to do the kind of wrap-up presentation. It says here in the program, the speaker briefly and irreverently summarizes the key observations and learnings from the conference and exhorts the delegates to return their questionnaires before leaving the building. I've done that before, but I'll do it again. In the original draft of the program, it said the speaker briefly and inaccurately summarizes the key findings of the conference, and that's probably more my style. I also am a bit nervous because various people, notably Chris Banks, have been bigging up this presentation, so I'm kind of nervous as to how it will go. So bear in mind, one of the rules of presenting, never apologize at the beginning, never explain, but you have to recognize that I wrote this whole presentation during the workshop feedback, so we'll see how we go. So that's me, you don't need to see all that again. So I'm going to do a sort of summary of, well, not a summary, but a sort of an opinionated, random kind of reminder of what you went through, and then I'm just going to wrap up with a few closing remarks. So this is you after 2 days of conference. That actually is Michael Mabe at the front there. And this is me at 4 a.m. in my hotel, thinking about what I was going to say at this point in the conference. So that's who we are. Another way of looking at this, Pippa tweeted this rather nice picture. I don't know if you can read the words from back there, but these are the various kind of people watching presentations in the hall and their reaction. And I've been following some reactions on Twitter. And of course, my reaction has been all the way through is, oh gosh, how on earth am I going to capture that and summarize that? But that's kind of what we've been all going through in the last couple of days. I feel I've done this before, but the summary essentially is it's all a bit of a mess. It used to be simple. You had a kangaroo, you showed it a bag, it jumped in the bag, and you were kind of job done. You know, it was very straightforward. And then, as Danny pointed out, it started to get a bit complicated and a bit octopusy a few years ago. And it is super complicated, and usually I end up putting up these diagrams that people have shown throughout the few days of how complicated it is or how weird it is, and there's one I showed 8 years ago at this conference about how weird and complicated it is, and I've got one also for Graham, because I know Graham likes little moving objects and things going around, but that's basically how scholarly publishing works at the moment. I think that's a pretty clear analysis of what's going on. So it has got a bit weird and complicated. It's all a bit of a mess, and here are some quotes from some people that I picked up during the couple of days, and I'll just put these up. We're not going to read them out, but you can kind of read those for yourselves if you can see those. And kind of, I'm just capturing some of the confusion and some of the concern that's been expressed, and this is just a small sampling of some of the things that have been said. So I think what we've done is we've created a situation where it used to be simple. You know, if you were an author, you wrote a paper, you sent it off to your favorite journal, they did all the work, maybe they published it, maybe they didn't, it didn't cost you anything, and then out it came, and all was well. And there was a problem. These journals were super expensive, and you know, part of that was profiteering, and part of that was they just are expensive to do. And we've faced with that challenge, we've changed that model. I don't want to make this an open access conference, but it's gone a bit that way, and we've changed that model into this hybrid, diverse mixture of things going on. So I thought I'd try and address, you know, what the various participants in this process want. So here's a picture of you lot again. And I thought it's always, the other key rule of presenting is always insult your audience. So here's a little bit of Dilbert. I'm quite a fan of taking 3-box Dilbert cartoons and turning them into 2 boxes or 1 box. So without any permission from Scott Abbons, here is a chance to insult editors and publishers. So that's kind of fun. He's also got one about researchers. So here's the researchers. What, I have to write down stuff and like preserve my data and all that kind of stuff. I'm not doing that. And then I was grateful to somebody who did also the distribution and sales end of things, which probably wasn't visible. I think this was Alice Ellingham's picture, but it probably was too small to see, but I've kind of blown it up a bit. So we all are kind of weird participants in this process. And I'm going to try and do this in what does everybody want? In previous years, I've summarized, I've kind of gone through the program in a sort of historical, logical, timeline way. This time I'm turning the whole thing upside down, trying to do it by what everyone wants and kind of what I've gleaned from the conference, what everyone wants. And some of this will kind of come back to you as being familiar from what different people during the conference said. So if we start with researchers and authors, mostly what they want is, it seems to me, is to be left alone and just get on with doing their research. That's the key thing. And that's kind of galling for people who want to change the model. And you know, Danny's job is to try and get these people to not be left alone and to do something different. And that goes on in a lot of offices of research management and a lot of libraries in those kind of ways. And so these authors are now being forced to make choices when really all they wanted to do was to get promoted and get tenure. And I think, you know, James, for instance, had some very interesting things to say about what motivates scientists and the evidence that shows that scientists in particular, but researchers generally, pursue paths of inquiry and paths of publishing that are in their career interests to follow. They want to publish with prestige and impact and brand, and yet we know all of those things are actually profoundly flawed in lots of ways, that prestige and brand are expensive and impact is unreliable, but that's what we're motivating these people to do. They want to do no admin. They don't want to make choices about where to publish and to evaluate different journals and do all the paperwork. They want it all to be easy and straightforward. They don't want to follow any rules. They want also to be able to read. I mean, researchers are readers. It says it on there. The researchers are the readers, and they want to be able to read stuff in a kind of frictionless way, and we'll come back to readers. But also they want to be read in a frictionless way. And this is perhaps the incentive to them, is to say, well, if you want your stuff to be read, it better be cheaply or freely or easily accessible, because that will be good for you. So there's kind of this author demand going on here. And the good news, I think, is because of some changes in publishing, authors are getting a lot more attention than they used to. They're becoming the customer for good or ill. There are good parts to that, bad parts to that. So who else is there? Well, we've got the readers. So what do the readers want? Well, they want the content to be free or cheap, or actually, in truth, they really don't care what it costs as long as somebody else is paying, right? And in the old days, when it was all, again, very simple and the library was paying, you couldn't get, 5 academics in the country to say, I really care what the library spends on these journals, until libraries started cancelling things because of costs and budgets, and then they started to really care, and they particularly cared about the journals they were published in, not actually the journals they wanted to read. So that's kind of a weird thing with readers. They also want easy discovery, and we talked about that a little bit, about how to find that stuff. They want a nice, clear, very usable user interface, especially as they're accessing all these different publisher platforms. They're accessing all these different resources to get at their content. I'm going to challenge, it's a bit scary for Tom here, but I'm not sure they want serendipity. Most people are very immersed in their field, and they know what they're looking for, and they know what they research. And interdisciplinary studies is a special thing for special reasons, because people are very poor at embracing that. They're good at it when they're supposed to be, writing conference presentations, and they're surfing the web instead, but less good when they're trying to do academic research. They don't really think about you get what you pay for. They don't really think about the consequences of freeness and what that means in terms of investment in user interface and experience and those kind of things. Who else have we got? Well, we've got the institutions. And the institutions, what do they want? They don't want to be in trouble. They don't want to be in trouble with regulators and funders. They don't want to have their budgets cut. They don't want to be in all kinds of sanction situations. They want to look good in league tables. They want to come out top. I meant to pull out something that somebody was tweeting about, how a university in Saudi Arabia is now 6th in the league tables or something on impact factor through some kind of gaming process. I didn't really understand the article, but I meant to pull it out and talk to you about it today, but I'm not going to, but it's there somewhere. They don't want to get into arguments with faculty. They don't want to challenge faculty who are difficult and have tenure and are like herding cats and all of that. They don't really want to spend any money on this stuff. So I wanted to pick up, there aren't 7 stages of the publishing. Is Graham still here? Did he have to go? He had to go. Oh, good. There just aren't 7 stages of the publishing lifestyle. That's completely wrong. Actually, if you look on here, it's very clear. There are actually 6 stages in the publishing life cycle, and I'm not prepared to have speakers contradict that, so that's unacceptable. I should be speaking to him about that later. If you didn't see his diagram clearly, here it is. So that's the life cycle. If it was a bit unclear on the previous screens, here it is again. just going by. You can actually get high-res versions of this if you look them up, but it wasn't super clear on the screens. Some other things that are not true. It isn't pronounced owl, it's pronounced owl, and it doesn't rhyme with towel. There's a lot of trying to invent things with OA in and then pronounce them. Actually, there are about 7,000 words in the English language with the letters OA in. So there's obviously, a bit of an uproar about this hoary old topic. I don't groan at that. But there's lots of other words to use. You don't have to make up ridiculous non-words. So, that's just wrong. So this is simply explaining it. I'm going to tell a story. I told a story last time. There's basically a useful test, how to tell the difference between an Australian and a New Zealander. I think I've told Danny this one, but it's very simple. You say, what did you have for breakfast? And if it's a Kiwi, they say, eeks. And if it's an Australian, they say, none of your bloody business. So we got a few bloodies in there, but bloody hell, it is confusing. And the policy is confusing, and the academics are confused, and it is a real challenge. What about libraries? So libraries are super confused as well. I've worked with libraries for sort of 25 years now, and I still don't really understand them. What libraries mostly want is the good old days of how it used to be. And really the best library was the chained library, because then you knew where the book was. Reference libraries are great, because nobody takes the books out. The other thing is people bring them back. And actually digital solves some of these problems. I was talking to a librarian she was a librarian who then went to work for a big retail book chain, actually in Sweden. And I said, well, what's it like moving from being a librarian to a retailer? And she said, oh, it's great. The books go out and they never come back. It's fantastic. So putting them back is hard. What they wanted was manageable journal subscriptions. So when journal subscriptions were going up in price day by day to unmanageable levels, although admittedly in the same way as the cost of faculty was going up at an unmanageable rate, and really anything that costs time gets more and more expensive, anything that's a product gets cheaper and cheaper. But it was becoming unmanageable. They wanted free stuff, so open access became a bit of an answer to that. But they also quite liked expensive subscriptions. There was a bit of a mixed thing going on where libraries found a new role, which was managing these incredibly expensive resources, and they invented ERM systems and kind of got into the expensive resource business while simultaneously trying to make these expensive resources free. So that was a bit scary and a bit confusing. And now they're kind of going, well, maybe we ought to be publishers, or we should take over the Office of Research, or we should be a repository or something. But libraries, I feel, are kind of reaching out for what their new role is. And I applaud that. I mean, if I were running an academic library, I'd be reaching out for all kinds of this stuff. But it is a bit of a struggle. It was Dennis Law gave an excellent account of, was the librarian at Strathclyde, and he said, rather oddly, his position in the university over the last 200 years, not his personally, but of the librarian, was a bit odd that his position in the ceremonial hierarchy was extremely high. And so he said that in a university parade, he walked behind the vice-chancellor and had the second biggest hat and everything. But in the organisation chart, he had gradually moved down the org chart from absolute top layer to being, down there with facilities management and those other, relevant things. And it was rather an interesting thing. Change of status was still high, but actual power and organizational role was lowering. And I think librarians need to find some way to grab that turf back. They might try and manage APCs. Librarians don't think much about you don't think about you get what you pay for. I'm generalizing wildly here, and I'm looking a bit queasy as librarians stare me down. But my experience is librarians, they're not trained in finance. They don't go into librarianship to be about the money, and so they don't make strong financial judgments about systems and subscription agents and content and those kind of things, and they're not really equipped to do that. Some do, obviously, but broadly speaking, the profession is not full of people who go, right, I really understand where this money's going and where this value is coming from, and that causes problems. So they want the good old days. Who doesn't? What do politicians want? Well, they want, apparently, free public access to publicly funded research. I'm a bit doubtful about this whole story about you go to your GP and he says, oh, yes, you're feeling a bit ill. Yeah, I've read the latest research paper on this. It's kind of not how it works. And if he did want to see that research, actually, he could access that anyway. But, that's what politicians think that it's about. In the same way, I want, access to our publicly funded aircraft carriers. I'd like a free house. All those things are good. Politicians love to give away free stuff, especially other people's free stuff. And I feel they've kind of jumped on the bandwagon a bit there. I was very cross with the Dutch Minister of Education about a year ago at APE, who basically did a speech saying, it just should be free, and it's good, and it's just lovely, and if you make it free, then that's just great. And anyway, publishers are evil, and they're taking profits, and they're just bad. And Fred Diller from the American Institute of Physics stood up and went, I don't think I'm bad. I think I'm trying to do some good here. I'm a little upset, actually, which was not unreasonable. But that's politicians for you. Who else have we got? Funders and regulators. And there was a nice clear diagram about what their requirements were, which is confusing the heck out of me. They want to be confusing. That's mostly what they want, I think. They want to be bossy, directive, and why not? If you're giving away hundreds of millions of pounds or dollars to people, you're going to be a little bit directive, and I hope that they're carefully reading James Evans' research about where they should be giving that funds towards. As it turns out, they should be thinking about what should actually be being researched rather than what academics would find most career-enhancing to research, I guess. They want to mandate the output medium. It used to be you sent your article to whoever you liked and hoped to get it published. It's kind of going the other way now, where the funder is saying, and this is where you'll publish your article, this is the copyright that you'll accept on that article because we've paid for it, and so this is how it goes from now on. And I think it was VTech who was saying, well, maybe they're going to become publishers. And there's some merit in all of this, but there's also some monopoly, state control kind of thing going on here, which says, yeah, we will fund you, but only if you go with all of our rules. And that feels, it just makes me a little nervous. What do publishers want? Well, as we know, publishers want to give huge piles of cash to their shareholders, and they just generally just want to be evil. I mean, I think we just know that's true. We'll edit this out of the video, by the way, this part here. But more realistically, I'd like to think that publishers, they don't want to have their business model destroyed, and indeed are very conservative. Publishers, prefer to have the same revenues this year as last year from the same sources on the whole. And I used to do a lot of work with textbook publishers whose basic model was you can do anything you like in digital as long as it doesn't affect print sales. That was the only thing that mattered. So there is a conservatism in there that does come across. Publishers, I think, would like to get some recognition for that. There is some work that goes on, and we discussed the cost of peer review, and we explored the fact that stuff goes on. There is copy editing and checking of ethics and stuff that goes on. They would like to be able to pay their staff some money. They would like to realize some value from their brands. Maybe they're not entitled to. I mean, if you spent 100 years building up a brand in your journal, you can expect to monetize that brand, but that's not to say you deserve to monetize that brand. Maybe you don't, and maybe that should be snatched away from you. But I can see why they protect that brand, and why, if you went to Coca-Cola and said, I know you've built up that brand, but you don't deserve it, we're taking it away from you, there would be lawsuits. They want to attract paying authors now. Now the author is the customer, what in trade publishing is called vanity publishing, I believe. They want to attract paying subscribers still, so it's very hybrid. They want to go on doing these 96 things that apparently they do. I'm going to look that up and see what those things are. And obviously they want to resist freemium at all cost, or Toby Greenium as we call it now. Anything else about publishers apparently? Well, this is so this is kind of VTech. I love this tweet. Autocorrect's a wonderful thing. So it's not bad. I mean, VTech was the kind of Viet Cong of the publishing industry in so many ways. So thank you for that, Learned Publishing. Wonderful autocorrect, my favorite. But it was kind of, he did this presentation, and the reaction was very interesting. His presentation was, we're going to start it new, we're going to a completely different way. And really interesting, over the next day and a half, people have come up to me, and about half have said, the man's a genius. Of course he's right. The article's the only thing that matters, and post-publication peer review is the right way to go, as long as you've got versioning, it's brilliant. No wonder he's so rich. Oh, no, they don't add that last part. And then an equal number of people have come up to me and said, that's ridiculous, it doesn't work. I mean, he's got hardly any publishers, and his reviewers have gone off reviewing, and it's just silly, it's not practical, it doesn't work. So that's just what I want in an opening keynote speaker, of course, is to provoke that kind of reaction. But he provoked a good reaction. So maybe, if you are a publisher, you should be thinking, well, I want to be a platform, really, or I want to be a mega journal. I don't really want to be a publisher at all. I think he's not wrong to say that we should be focusing on articles, that the article is the thing, not the issue, not the journal. So we can forget about issues, except perhaps as a retrospective gathering together of articles, rather than as a pre-packaging. So it's about continuous publishing, which is something we should talk about more at this conference. Managing versioning is really important, and I think that's quite dangerous. I think if people in critical areas of research are looking at an old copy of a paper that isn't, hasn't had corrections done to it, that's quite a scary thing. And this idea is that you'll let the market handle peer review. I'm not sure that's true. It kind of works with Wikipedia, but I think we can see from Alice's comments that you have to chivvy peer reviewers to peer review, and not just because you're trying to get them to do it for free, but just it's a hard thing to do and you have to chivvy them. That's how that works. Maybe we're coming on to reviewers. Reviewers, oh good, that's the thing, you've got to predict the next slide, you see, and that looks as if you know what you're doing. Reviewers apparently want to do a little bit less copy editing, and I'm not sure they should be doing copy editing, but apparently that's kind of what happens when they receive these articles. Do they want openness, or do they want anonymity, or both? This is one of these things where there's two different camps coming through two different directions. Some saying, well, of course it should be open, and of course reviews should be signed, and they should know who they're reviewing, blah, blah, blah. Or triple blind is obviously the way to go. And I don't know the answer, but it's a tension. They want slick processes, and obviously that will keep costs down, but also they want flexibility, and they want to write in with emails and questions. I was going to do the mole rat thing. I was going to do a picture of the... What was that quote from Alice about, yes, the mole rats consented to participate in the experiment. I mean, a bit like you've consented to be here now, you see, that's the same principle. They want fast turnaround. Well, authors do, but reviewers want nice lax timetables so that they can fit it around their other work. They want credit, reviewers want credit for reviewing, or they want points or money or something. Money's quite dangerous. There's a lot of research that says people will do things for free that they won't do for small amounts of money. And if somebody said to you that they'd pay you £1 for editing a Wikipedia page, you wouldn't do it. You'd say, well, it's not worth it for £1. But if you're like me, you'll do it for free because you kind of want to. And there is actually lots of research that says cognitively it's a very different thing. And I think to pay peer reviewers, you'd have to pay them a heck of a lot of money to make it, in a sense, worth their while. Particularly as, again, less and less they get credit in their institutions for that sort of work. James's data seems to suggest that the more they know about the subject, the more harshly they review it, I think is what I saw, and the less they know, the more generously they review it. I think that's probably true. What else have we got? Oh, well, so we got the tortoise and the hare thing. I quite like that. So the tortoise and the cheetah. So who's reviewing? The reviewers are reviewing slowly, and the authors think it should be fast, basically. And time is money. That is the key, and that's the thing that I've written a blog about this on the digital science blog, that, I think academics don't always get this, that time is money. Nearly done. This is the most important part. What do conference organisers want out of all of this? Because that, I think, is probably the key question. Obviously, what we want is the debate to continue violently and forever. That's good. But also, actually quite critical, we need publishers and suppliers to stay in business. And I think this is part of the economics of the publishing industry, perhaps the most important part, is without businesses that can sponsor conferences, and there's a serious message in this actually, our sponsors here have contributed a lot of funds to the conference, which allows the tickets to be at the price they are. If these companies didn't exist and we had no sponsors, the tickets would be twice the price, and of course the commercial organisations that buy the tickets right now at half the price wouldn't be able to afford these current ticket prices, never mind twice the price. So this conference would be hard to manage. It would have to be a kind of unconference and be all virtual and so on, without this commercial cash process going on. So it's a little bit of a mess. Don't know what happens next. Closing. Okay, so that's my summary. That's kind of where we are. So these are my last 2 or 3 minutes of remarks about kind of where we've been and where we're going next. So firstly, thanks again. And I kind of want to thank everybody, delegates, speakers, panelists, everyone who's been involved. It's just been fantastic having so much support, and our sponsors who have supported us so well. So thank you all for that. I'm going to do a little commercial for next year. So next year, should we do one next year is obviously the first question. Should we do one next year? Yeah, okay. I won't go a show of hands. Okay, probably, we're talking 21st of February, because Nawin in particular asked me to do it on President's Day. We have a bit of a tension. There's a conflict between President's Day in America and half-term here in the UK, and half-term probably wins. So I would appreciate, please email suggestions for topics and speakers, and also volunteers for our Planning Committee and Advisory Board. Not to say that I'm not happy with the one I've got. The people who've worked with us have been great. The real problem with the Planning Committee and Advisory Board members is we need more people from the second half of the alphabet. You might think that I just went through my address book and kind of stopped at L. It's not true. I don't know what happened there. But so if your surname, look at your badge now. If your surname begins with something later than L, then email me right away. I also need an administrator. So if anyone knows of an excellent administrator who'd like about 20 days' work in the next year, let me know. I'd like to just say something about registrations. I was advised, particularly by my wife, not to do this little segment, but I'd just like to share with you the registration profile of people registering for the conference. And we had 157 registrations over the few weeks you can see there. So at the bottom is week numbers in a good European way. So you can see basically we launched the conference, I think I've got dates actually here. So we launched the conference in October. We started to get a few registrations. We did pretty well in December. Then it flatlined. And then it picked up again. And then it kind of, the last 5 weeks, half the delegates have registered. This is my blood pressure chart that tracks this quite interestingly. So this is really a plea for, if you are thinking of coming next year, could you register in kind of October or November, something like that, not February, to home in on the last 2 weeks. So this is the past 2 weeks. Registrations closed last Tuesday, which is halfway through that chart. But you can see in the week before registration closed, we had about 20 registrations. People continued to register up to the last minute and then thereafter. And indeed, actually our last registration was on Monday. So again, if you're thinking of coming, just plan ahead a little bit. This is a chance for me to say nice things about librarians. By far, the largest proportion of people who registered early were librarians. So thank you for that, for being organized and prepared and having your act together. So anyway, you're more than welcome to register late if you have to, but please, shop early. So, as I say, put the date in your calendars right now. So register in about 1st of November will be fine. That would say good. Do not forget to hand in your 2 surveys, the green one and the white one. Our team will be at the back there. Our team at the back, they're waking up. Yeah, we'll be collecting them off you and not letting you leave the building without them. Please hand in your badges also at reception. And finally, Scholarly Social, I should mention, which is a trip to the pub for scholarship publishing people, is this evening. This is Bernie Folan's running this. That's the pub, that's the address. I shall certainly be there having 6 or 7 pints. And really, the last thing I have to say is thank you all very much for being here. Thank you.